In this module, we've been talking about the drinking context, policies to change the drinking context, and drunk driving policies. And anytime we're talking about changing alcohol consumption, we should expect pushback from the alcohol industry because it's really the antithesis of what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell the product, and we're trying to reduce its use. And in that same vein, the alcohol industry has been very interested in these policies that change the drinking context, and they've been very interested in drunk driving policies. Now, they're smart about it. They'll never lobby against a law directly, but they do lobby against these laws, particularly against stricter drunk driving laws, through different trade organizations. So we're going to do a brief case study. It's going to focus on the American Beverage Institute and Utah's new 0.05 BAC law. So Utah is a very interesting state in the United States. It has a very unique set of alcohol laws. So if beer is sold in a grocery store, it has to be below 4% alcohol by volume. It can't be high strength. High strength alcoholic beverages, whether beer, wine, or liquor, can only be sold either in a state-run liquor store or an on-premise establishment. They have a statewide rule against the time when alcohol can be sold. And even when you're in the bar, you can't actually see the bartender mixing drinks. It all has to be behind this veiled partition. It's a very interesting environment. In March 2017, they were the first state in the country, in the U.S. Anyway, to pass a 0.05 BAC limit. So instead of saying that you're legally drunk at 0.08 when you're drinking and driving, like that would be the cutoff, their new BAC limit is 0.05. But there were some caveats to the law. One, it wouldn't go into effect until December 30th, 2018. It wouldn't go into effect for a year and a half, which is a very long time for a relatively simple change in law to go into effect. And this was done for the legislature to address unintended consequences of the bill, whatever that phrase may be, and to allow other modifications, whether it was seeing what other states would do or changing the penalties for violations within this kind of new range. But what's important is that this 0.05 limit is following government recommendations. The National Transportation Safety Board has recommended states implement a 0.05 BAC limit in order to reduce drunk driving and injuries and death resulting from drunk driving. And I do want to point out that this 0.05 standard is the standard in many countries. So every green country you see on the map, whether it's Canada, China, many European countries like Germany and Poland, Australia, Brazil, very large countries, very populous countries, have this 0.05 BAC standard. So Utah is not this radical government. It's a very conservative state politically, but it's not this radical government trying to implement something new that has never been seen before. They're simply following government recommendations and mimicking what has been done elsewhere. And it's also important to note that this 0.05 BAC limit is effective. It effectively lowers drunk driving. It effectively reduces alcohol-related traffic accidents. It effectively reduces alcohol-related traffic crash fatalities. So from a public health standpoint, from an addiction science standpoint, this is something that we should be advocating for, and we have the science to back it up. But again, the alcohol industry is essentially against the stricter drunk driving limits because they know it's going to reduce alcohol consumption. If we reduce alcohol consumption, it's going to reduce their bottom line because less alcohol is being purchased and sold. So both the alcohol and the restaurant industries have lobbied heavily against the passage of the bill. Now, it passed anyway, but they did lobby against the bill. Again, they don't do it directly. They do it through trade associations. They don't want to be seen as directly advocating for anti-drunk driving legislation. So they did it through the American Beverage Institute. And even after the passage of this bill, they still advocate heavily against the implementation of the bill. Now, it's important to identify who the American Beverage Institute is. Part of their mission is to promote responsible alcohol consumption. However, they have a documented history of lobbying against drunk driving laws. They have a documented history against lobbying against secondhand smoke laws. And the person who is running this institute, this trade association, has ties to the tobacco industry. He was a lobbyist for the tobacco industry, trying to prevent anti-tobacco legislation and policies from being put in place. So you have this institute, this trade association with a history of working with the tobacco industry. You have this institute who now has a history of working with the alcohol industry and not for public health gain. So they're working really, despite their mission to promote responsible alcohol consumption, they're really working against policies that we know will actually promote responsible alcohol consumption. Now, the American Beverage Institute has paid for many ads attacking Utah in a variety of ways. So these types of ads are attacking Utah itself. Essentially, you come here, you're going to get arrested while you're here, and then you're going to have to leave on probation. Or the other one, fully on the right side of the screen, from Colorado, a neighboring state. It's a thank you card saying thank you for implementing it because less people will be going to your state. Now, I do want to point out, there are very few instances where someone is going to a state specifically to drink, right? Like, there are very few instances where you're going on a vacation specifically to drink and specifically to get drunk while drinking. Like, this is not a common thing that occurs, at least among the people that I know. So these ads are kind of out there on the little more ridiculous side, at least in my opinion. But they also attacked the legislatures in Utah themselves. So what they did was they found research, and it's good, it's valid research saying that people above the age of 65 essentially have the same response times when driving as someone who has a 0.08 BAC blood alcohol concentration level. So they identified Utah's legislators who supported this bill, who are over the age of 65, and basically publicly tried to name and shame them through these types of advertisements. The director of ABI has argued that instead of this 0.05 BAC law, they should only target repeat offenders and really high BAC drivers. And I had to use that in quotes because they actually use the term really high BAC drivers. What this means, I don't know, but they're probably talking about BAC drivers in the 0.15 range, the 0.2 range, people in multiples higher than the 0.08, 0.05, 0.08 level. And they've actually also created a petition urging the repeal of the law. So they are actively and aggressively trying to make sure that this 0.05 BAC law does not come into place. And remember, the ABI is working for the alcohol industry. They are being paid by the alcohol industry. They get funding from the alcohol industry. Now, Utah itself has basically said these ads lack class, they're offensive, but the problem now is that we don't know what's going to happen. There are 18 months from the time the bill was passed until it's implemented. There's about a year from when this presentation was made until the law was implemented. So we don't know, and we won't know what happened until we get closer to that deadline.